And as I said, I'm Dr. Martina and I'm an imposter. That's right, ladies. I am an imposter. Oftentimes, when we hear this word imposter, many of us automatically think someone is pretending to be something that they're not, pretending to be someone who they're not, someone that is purposefully being ill intent and trying to deceive someone else. An imposter is someone who is trying to do something for gain, personal gain, for a benefit, for a personal benefit. And with that, we have a conversation that I want to have with you over the next few minutes. And as Rachel said, definitely going to allow some time for us to answer questions as we move forward through the remainder of this session. So, what is the imposter? Is the question. Many of you may have an idea or an inkling or have some thoughts about what that means to you personally, but I want to take a moment to share with you an opportunity to hear what it is. So, when we think about the imposter, I use the term imposter phenomenon versus a syndrome. And you're going to hear a little bit about why that is shortly. But what is that? I have presented to you an amazing graph. This is some data that I have found. So what is it? Okay. So for us, how we're going to look at the term imposter is going to be that inability to internalize success. It is going to be those perceived feelings of self-doubt, insecurity, fraudulence, and despite overwhelming accomplishments, achievements, degrees earned, promotions held, it is also going to be a feeling in which we as women often attribute our success to luck, or we just happened to deceive someone else. And unfortunately, when we're thinking about the imposter and this inability to internalize success, we think, and many of us who are here in this room, you're here for a reason. Why have good things happened to you? Why have good things happened to many of these students that we've encountered? It's because we feel like, well, it was by luck. It was by mistake. It was because the organization needed more women. It is because they needed a person of color. It is because something bad is about to happen. So that's why something good has happened to me. And so we're going to take a moment to listen to a short video that kind of talks about it in a way that I think it would resonate with many of you. So I'm going to hit play.
Even after writing 11 books and winning several prestigious awards, Maya Angelou couldn't escape the nagging doubt that she hadn't really earned her accomplishments. Albert Einstein experienced something similar. He described himself as an involuntary swindler whose work didn't deserve as much attention as it had received. Accomplishments at the level of Angelou's or Einstein's are rare, but their feeling of fraudulence is extremely common. Why can't so many of us shake feelings that we haven't earned our accomplishments, or that our ideas and skills aren't worthy of others' attention? Psychologist Pauline Rose Clance was the first to study this unwarranted sense of insecurity. In her work as a therapist, she noticed many of her undergraduate patients shared a concern. Though they had high grades, they didn't believe they deserved their spots at the university. Some even believed their acceptance had been an admissions error. While Clance knew these fears were unfounded, she could also remember feeling the exact same way in graduate school. She and her patients experienced something that goes by a number of names: imposter phenomenon, imposter experience, and imposter syndrome. Together with colleague Suzanne Imes, Clance first studied imposterism in female college students and faculty. Their work established pervasive feelings of fraudulence in this group. Since that first study, the same thing has been established across gender, race, age, and a huge range of occupations, though it may be more prevalent and disproportionately affect the experiences of underrepresented or disadvantaged groups. To call it a syndrome is to downplay how universal it is. It's not a disease or an abnormality, and it isn't necessarily tied to depression, anxiety, or self-esteem. Where do these feelings of fraudulence come from? People who are highly skilled or accomplished tend to think others are just as skilled. This can spiral into feelings that they don't deserve accolades and opportunities over other people. And as Angelou and Einstein experienced, there's often no threshold of accomplishment that puts these feelings to rest. Feelings of imposterism aren't restricted to highly skilled individuals either. Everyone is susceptible to a phenomenon known as pluralistic ignorance, where we each doubt ourselves privately, but believe we're alone in thinking that way because no one else voices their doubts. Since it's tough to really know how hard our peers work, how difficult they find certain tasks, or how much they doubt themselves, there's no easy way to dismiss feelings that we're less capable than the people around us. Intense feelings of imposterism can prevent people from sharing their great ideas or applying for jobs and programs where they'd excel. At least so far, the most surefire way to combat imposter syndrome is to talk about it. Many people suffering from imposter syndrome are afraid that if they ask about their performance, their fears will be confirmed. And even when they receive positive feedback, it often fails to ease feelings of fraudulence. But on the other hand, hearing that an advisor or mentor has experienced feelings of imposterism can help relieve those feelings. The same goes for peers. Even simply finding out there's a term for these feelings can be an incredible relief. Once you're aware of the phenomenon, you can combat your own imposter syndrome by collecting and revisiting positive feedback. One scientist who kept blaming herself for problems in her lab started to document the causes every time something went wrong. Eventually, she realized most of the problems came from equipment failure and came to recognize her own competence. We may never be able to banish these feelings entirely, but we can have open conversations about academic or professional challenges. With increasing awareness of how common these experiences are, perhaps we can feel freer to be frank about our feelings and build confidence in some simple truths. You have talent, you are capable, and you belong. Everyone can use a little extra kick of confidence sometimes. Find out some tips and tricks for boosting yours with this video.
So that was my brief introduction to the imposter syndrome, also imposter phenomenon, imposter experience. So as I said previously, when I talk about these imposter feelings, I like to refer to it as a phenomenon versus a syndrome, because when we do say syndrome, we first think that something's wrong, we're ill, it's a disease, it's something that is really a horrible experience that we're suffering from. So I like to refer to it as a phenomenon that occurs or as an experience that I personally have dealt with through the past years as a professional in higher education. So, how does one even know, or how does one even gauge whether or not they're experiencing these feelings of imposterism? Well, the two psychologists that mentioned earlier, Dr. Pauline Clance and Dr. Imes, they developed a tool or a scale. It is a 20-question scale, very short, very sweet, on a Likert scale, 1 through 5, where you rate your feelings. So it's looking at the intensity, the frequency of these imposter feelings that one has over a period of time. And so, for those of you who are on a computer and you just happen to have your cell phones handy, you are more than welcome to pop in this QR code, or also take note of the link that is dropped below. And that way you can actually access it. It's a PDF form. It is free that you can use to kind of work through this assessment. Takes about 5 to 7 minutes. But for those who are engaging or taking advantage of this particular assessment, I want you to know that it is just an assessment. It is just a gauge for you to use as a conversation piece as you speak with others. So I mentioned about that intensity and frequency of these feelings. And so the scoring, again, relates to those intensities and feelings. As I was doing my dissertation research, I had senses that I felt like those imposter feelings, but one thing that I made myself do was refrain from taking this survey so that it didn't influence me, because I had a feeling that I was going to be really intense, but I wasn't sure, and I didn't want that to impact me. So I waited until after I defended my dissertation before I took this. And of course, I was right there at that frequent imposter feelings and that rating scale. But it is very simple to take it. You just do the math, you calculate, and voila, the intensity of your imposter experiences are going to be outlined for you. I will add, and it was mentioned in the video, that this is not an official diagnosis tool. It is not a diagnosis per the American Psychiatric Association's DSM, for those of you who are familiar with it. But as I mentioned, it is a tool to provide insight that can serve as those talking points and conversations regarding these feelings and how you as an individual internalize these feelings. I'll also add that the effects that we'll talk about in more detail are concerning and may need attention should it take an effect or make an impact on an individual's mental health, or should it begin to impact your quality of life. Okay. There are different characteristics that follow with these imposter feelings as far as who experiences them. And per my amazing graph here, who experiences, as you can see, people who get the imposter, other people who get the imposter, and then literally everyone else. So it is written that about 70% of individuals at some point in their lifetime experience these imposter feelings. With these imposter feelings, it is not just limited, it is a universal experience. It impacts high achieving individuals, faculty, staff, students, as we mentioned, all identities. According to Clance and Imes, feelings were originally thought to impact females. Subsequent research through the years has found that it appears in males as well. As we denoted, it occurs across professions, undergraduates, graduates, across socioeconomic backgrounds, as well as a variety of social and cultural settings, just to name a few. At the undergraduate level, when we're dealing with our undergraduates, especially since we're on a college campus, it has been identified in a variety of disciplines, including psychology, health sciences, the medical, dental, nursing, and pharmacy areas, engineering. Many of these professions are help-giving type of professions where many of us feel these sensations. In graduates, it's often felt in those psychology and doctoral programs. So as I shared, it is definitely a universal experience that occurs across a multitude of identities. So how does one know? How does one know? How do you feel? How do these feelings come about? Well, as you can see from the list that I provided, these are only a few, but oftentimes many of us may begin feeling that we're not as smart as others. You're sitting in the lecture, you're sitting in the business meeting, you're sitting in the staff retreat talking about the strategic plans and goals and missions of the organizations, and you're like, I'm not sure I know what this is. Sometimes we may feel that we're undeserving, we're making excuses, we feel like we're not supposed to be here, but we are. What do we do? How much can we hide? We may find ourselves in situations where we start to isolate and pull back from different opportunities. We pull back, not feeling comfortable with speaking engagements, we pull back and we isolate and hide. So no one finds out that we're not supposed to be here. Sometimes we find ourselves being charming. I think I might overuse the charm from time to time, but sometimes we try to wow others with that charm versus the ability, even though we purely have that gift. Nervous, the nervous laughter, the twirling of the hair, the clicking of the pen. And then, we're trying to be very diligent all the time, and overcompensating, thinking about perfection. It has to be right. Avoiding displays of confidence, again, that withdrawal piece. And it also may appear as feelings of fear and anxiety attacks, panic attacks as we move forward. Oftentimes when we're thinking about how IP impacts us and how it occurs in our lives, we find that It appears at certain times. Yes, my little dice did cover up the words that you see in this awesome this graphic, but that is actually and what I said to myself at times. But when does the imposter sufferers experience this? So I'll talk a little bit about that. For many, it develops in early life due to upbringing, environment, experiences that manifest itself during our college years. Oftentimes, when we were kind of coming into these new environments, a new campus, for me, the campus was bigger than my hometown, and we find ourselves at a research one institution when we went to a small private or liberal college around the way. It also occurs when we're in an unfamiliar environment, when there's new rigorous requirements expected of us and are introduced. It often rears its ugly head in times of competition or when extremely high expectations have been set or the internal perfectionist finds itself hard at work. And the imposter has a tendency to set extremely high goals and unrealistic standards for self evaluation. And we feel that for some reason we have to be at 100% of the time. These internal imposter feelings are also provoked by perceptions that the role of an individual is playing is inconsistent with one's point of self view. This may occur when one believes their vocation is atypical for their gender or ethnicity. For example, women holding a position in a male dominated fields, let's say STEM, for example, women were thought to be from a study that I read, and this was back in the late 50s, but it was interesting. Women were thought to be too weak to endure the strain of higher education. At one point, women were thought to be frail and that overstudy would surely give them brain fever. And so, how could any woman manage to survive college, children? Surely they would be sickly if they did so, if they're even able to have children at all. So, sometimes thinking about the timing in which one grew up and the expectations and perspectives of women in male dominated fields, these are other things that we were competing against. Like at one point, a man thought that we were just too frail, and we took that, well, I'm too frail, I'm not supposed to be here. And so we want to work on dispelling those myths. Again, when does it appear with those stimuli, those triggers, competitive environments, high expectations, stereotype threat, when there's the lack of social capital, and when we may find ourselves in oppressive or exclusive practices. So now how do we face it? Once we have the opportunity to give this feeling, this set of feelings that we're going to call imposterism, what do we do as women, or those identifying as women, or even those males who have these feelings? What can we do? Well, we're going to use self-authorship as a strategy. We already have those internal skill sets to defeat these feelings. So with self-authorship, this is this new holistic movement that shifts from this external point of view to these internal sensations. And as individuals, we have our own set of beliefs, values, convictions, and ideals. The shift to self-authorship happens when we welcome the coordinator of those external components. In other words, we take control and we start to trust those internal voices. To this point, one of the authors of and creators of the self-authorship theory had noted that self-authorship is the mental making of an ideal or belief. It evolves when the challenge to become self-authoring is present and is accomplished by sufficient support to help an individual shift to internal meaning making. And implementing this, being conscious and aware and intentionally being intentional to implement this into our daily lives. And we think of this as our reality versus our reactions. The reality is that we are capable, we should be confident, we are able, and that we do belong in this space. versus reacting to that competition, those feelings of imperfection, those feelings that I'm not supposed to be here. Within this self-authorship mode, we need to think about taking time to build an internal plan, taking time to reflect, taking time to build this internal foundation so that we can become willing and able and capable of accepting who we are. Taking time to write out and author what our lives currently hold and what we wish to hold. It is our time to examine our relationships, our thoughts, and all of our beliefs, and taking time to explore our natural gifts that we're all given, to explore our strengths that we know we have, and then intending to lead your life, living it as your authentic self. And so we must be mindful to make that internal commitment and remind ourselves. It also could be simply looking in this participant list, making note of those of who are here, and identifying and creating your special imposter network of friends. Developing that community of women and within your sister circle that you can go to when you need that moment of inspiration, when you forgot to bring your journal to work that day. It could be a simple email. It could be a simple time away where you just connect with one another or as an individual in your space, authoring what is next for you. It will not be an easy journey. It may be times where we may find ourselves facing things that we hadn't thought of in a long time. It could be any time that we reflect on our experiences, past lives, and where we want to go. It could be difficult. I'm struggling with my words today, but difficult to face those inner thoughts that we often have about ourselves. And the shift is going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight. So developing this sense of self-authorship, it will take time to transition out of those negative thoughts to these positive thinking models. And the more that we are consistent, the more that we are intentional, the more time that we give to developing our positive thoughts and acceptance, the easier it will become. And this self process will become a major improvement in how you identify with your imposter within. I'll be asking you during this self authorship process to trust your internal voice, to build and solidify that foundation, secure your little internal commitments to yourself, and create an environment where you feel that you are in control. Additional strategies that you can try as you begin to fulfill your wish um, to face this imposter head on is to write and to journal. I addressed my imposter just briefly. I called her out, called her out in my dissertation, in my acknowledgments. I acknowledged her. And because I felt powerful at that time, because I didn't think I was supposed to be there as a first generation student, figuring out college with an ACT that I'm not sure how I even got into college, but a lot of the self-doubt and negative thinkings and making it through, I wanted to call out the imposter and said, this one's for you, hun. I got you. So now that I was able to identify, I was able to kind of point it out and make it known that I was aware of the feelings that I had so that I could then deal with it as I move forward and continue to grow as a person and as a professional. With writing, it allows us to express our inner thoughts that we have, and you can utilize the notes feature on your phone if you are the tech savvy person. So find time. There isn't a reason anymore that you don't have to have the old-fashioned pen and paper. Just jotting it down on a post-it note that you have near your desk. I keep my little set of post-it notes, boom, right here, so that I can jot down those feelings to create an outlet to express the feelings that I am experiencing at any given time. And I also want to share that this journaling will allow you to kind of shape your mindset, that growth mindset, and this state where people are believing that their most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Brains and talent are only the starting point. This aligns with releasing those imposter thoughts that we may carry. And the imposter in us may say that we are limited to these areas, but using self authorship, journaling, writing it down, it will allow us to develop our inner strength and allows us to grow and develop accordingly. We're going to ask that you think about shaping your mindset. We're going to ask you to be authentic, be your authentic self and own it. Being your authentic self allows you to express your whole self genuinely. While this may sound easy to do, it can be difficult if it's something that you're not accustomed to and have done on a regular basis. You may struggle with showing people one side of yourself, your whole self, and this requires self authorship to tap into our self awareness as well as our self acceptance. Communicate. We've all heard that communication is key. Clearly communicating your expectations to ourselves, for ourselves, helps to create a healthy boundary and helps to create some authentic relationships. And we need you to surround yourself with that community. This directly correlates to communication. The people around you surround, the type of people, especially that you surround yourself with, is important. And it is imperative that you do so. Creating a positive environment, having meaningful conversations with friends, colleagues, and family who are positive enforcements in your life are necessary to facing the imposter within.